Imagine waking up to the sound of police boots crunching through your own grape rows because your HOA decided your family farm doesn't fit the vibe. What would you do if someone in a pantsuit tried to shut down your livelihood over fence posts and pride? Dawn draped Solstice Valley in soft gold. The kind of light that makes even dust look holy. I was out there at 5 o'clock in the morning, pruning shears in hand, steam curling from my coffee, when the siren started a low, lonely wail across the hills. Radios crackled. 2 officers stepped through the mist, careful where they put their feet, like the vines might bite. And there she was, Karen Hartwell, HOA president, self-crowned. Phone up. Perfume cutting through the earth, smell like lemon on steel. She stood at the edge of my vineyard, like a queen inspecting a battlefield. She thought she already won. I took another sip and let her have her moment. She had no idea she'd just made the biggest mistake of her very curated life. Name's Marcus Thornfield. Not long ago, I was a corporate attorney in San Francisco, billing $400 an hour and wearing suits that cost more than a month's rent. Then my marriage imploded. Turns out, my ex liked my law partner's jokes more than my vows. The divorce stripped me clean faster than a casino slot on a bad streak. All I had left was my grandfather's place, 40 acres of grapes and grit in Solstice Valley. Granddad planted his first vines back in 1962, when the valley was farms and folks who minded their own business. Now the hills wear cul-de-sacs like cheap jewelry, beige castles, perfect hedges, 1,000 rules about trash cans and mailboxes. You know the type. I moved into the old farmhouse with floorboards that complain, like arthritic knees, and a German shepherd named Beryl, who treats every delivery truck like it owes him money. The vineyard was tired irrigation, old as the Carter years. Tractors that remember disco, but it was ours. Legacy. I woke with dew on the leaves, and went to bed with the smell of clean dirt in my lungs. After years of boardrooms and backstabs, that felt like therapy. Enter Karen. Picture the word, compliance. Wearing lipstick. Former city council hopeful. A white SUV that's never seen a gravel road. Hair sprayed so firm, it could deflect hail. She rules Solstice Heights, the new subdivision stitched along my eastern fence line, with a smile that says, "Bless your heart," and a clipboard that says, "Pay the fine." The spark. Fencing. I was replacing rotten runs to keep deer out and drunk wedding guests in. Standard agricultural wire. 6-foot posts sunk proper. I'm halfway through a row when a car door slams like a gavel. Karen marches over, heels stabbing dust, and announces, "That fence violates our community aesthetic." I lean on the post hole digger. "Ma'am, this property has been in my family more than 60 years. Your HOA has been here. What? 3? She smiles with all teeth. Rules are rules. This is a residential neighborhood now. We have standards. The way she rolled the word residential, you'd think vines were a contagious disease. 2 days later, a certified letter lands heavy on my kitchen table. A cease and desist. Unauthorized agricultural structures. Alleged zoning violations. Threats of $500 a day in fines. Copies mailed to the county. To my bank. To the local paper. This wasn't a complaint. This was a campaign. Here's what Karen didn't know. I spent 15 years in real estate law. My old mentor used to say, when somebody tries to bury you in paperwork, you bury them back, but deeper. I brewed a pot strong enough to melt a spoon and dug into Granddad's files. dusty ledgers, hand-drawn maps, and a manila folder labeled, in his shaky script, "Important keep forever." Inside, the deed, from 1962, agricultural exemption, perpetual farming rights. In plain English, future busybodies. Kindly go pound sand. I scanned the whole packet. Drafted a response with citations sharp enough to shave with. And sent copies to everyone Karen had looped in, including the reporter who thought he'd get gossip and instead got a free seminar in rural zoning. 2 mornings later, a county inspector named Rodriguez showed up. Good guy. Apologetic. Routine follow-up. He said, "Clipboard ready." An anonymous tip about unpermitted buildings. Anonymous. Right. I could smell Karen's expensive perfume on the word. We walked that property for 3 straight hours. The barn, built in 1965, grandfathered. Equipment shed, 1998, up to code. Root cellar solid as a sermon. He signed off with a nod. Your agricultural exemption is ironclad. Mr. Thornfield, whoever filed this doesn't understand rural law. That was my light bulb moment. This wasn't about fences. It was a shove. Testing whether I'd stumble. When I didn't, Karen brought in friends. A week later, an emergency HOA meeting. Agenda: community beautification standards. Impacts of nearby commercial agriculture on property values. Subtle as a sledgehammer. The community center smelled like industrial cleaner and middle-class anxiety. Maybe 30 homeowners sat in folding chairs. Faces tight. Karen ran the front table with 2 board members, who nodded like dashboard bobbleheads. She flashed a PowerPoint, protecting our investment. Neighborhood character. Safety. Harmony. Corporate buzzwords, wearing a pearl necklace. Her finale, a petition claiming my vineyard hurt values. The way she said commercial agriculture. You'd think I was cooking meth instead of fermenting grapes. She opened the floor for comments, expecting applause. Instead, Mrs. Patterson, retired teacher. Spine, like rebar, stood up. Marcus's family has been here longer than these roofs, she said. Voice steady. His vines are why we loved this valley. Not the garage door parades. A couple more old-timers chimed in. And for the first time, I watched Karen's smile crack. She tabled the vote pending legal review. Which is HOA for I got caught bluffing. As the room emptied, I saw her whispering to a man with an expensive briefcase, the bill-by-the-minute kind. When she noticed me looking, she snapped the conversation shut like a trap. Back home, Barrel leaned against my leg like a question. I scratched his ears and said, "We're not done, buddy." He wagged. Smart dog knew the real fight hadn't started yet. Karen's next move came straight from the Suburban War Manual. If you can't beat them in court, smear them online. A Facebook group popped up overnight. Concerned neighbors of Solstice Valley. She posted artfully framed photos, making my tractor look like a rust monster and my sprayer look like a chemical cannon. Has anyone noticed more flies since a certain business expanded, she wrote. All faux innocence. The comments piled up. Fear travels faster than truth. I felt the chill immediately. Folks who used to wave started studying their shoes. Bill at the hardware store stopped small talk. Even my farmer's market stand got a few stink-eye stares. Then my bank called. Janet, who'd handled Granddad's accounts forever, suddenly needed additional documentation for routine equipment financing. Her smile was paper thin. So I pulled records. Lots of them. Public filings. Deeds. Permits. And the picture sharpened into something ugly. Preston Hartwell. Karen's husband was a developer with more fingers in this valley than a pickpocket at a county fair. Subdivisions finished. Subdivisions planned. And buried in LLCs. Offers on old farms. Here's the math. Agricultural land might fetch $8,000 an acre. Rezone to residential. Try $50,000. My 40 acres were a multi-million-dollar carrot if they could push me out. I called Jake Morrison, an environmental attorney I'd survived law school with. "Buddy," he said, laughing grim and low when I laid it out. "Textbook land grab. They count on farmers not knowing their rights." We went full chess. I hired a surveyor and ordered a title search back to when this valley was cows and common sense. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down. She posted scare pieces about farms making people sick, copy and paste nonsense with scary stock photos. You know, there's people who will believe anything if it promises higher property values. 3 days later, my surveyor brought news that made me spit coffee. Turns out, our line runs 50 feet farther east than I'd thought, right through the manicured backyards of 3 Solstice Heights homes. Granddad had granted construction easements, but kept the ground itself. Classic farmer move, never sell dirt. Only loan space. On top of that, a century-old utility easement snakes through the entire subdivision, giving me lawful access no HOA can block. The board's leverage dropped like a stone. Karen tried a community safety forum, hawking petitions with signatures that looked like they shared a handwriting tutor. She said my vineyard attracted drunk drivers and posed a fire hazard. The room smelled like stale coffee and panic. I sat in the back and listened. The more she talked, the more it sounded like desperation. Then came the thick envelope from a white shoe firm, cease and desist. Again, this time alleging public nuisance, traffic violations, noise, improper commercial use, 72 hours to shut down or face a lawsuit seeking damages. Injunctions. Attorney's fees. It read authoritative enough that most folks would have folded. Problem was, my divorce had emptied my savings, and hiring a defense team at $400 an hour felt like swallowing gravel. But I also knew the playbook they were hoping I'd blink. Instead, I drove to the courthouse. Because the county's digital record system is, well, not so much digital. 6 hours with a flashlight and a stack of dust. That is where Ethel finds me. Ethel Martinez, clerk since the Nixon years. Eyes bright as a hawk. "Sweetheart," she says, sliding a bundle across the counter. "You keep hunting like that, and you're gonna trip something big." What I tripped was older than most of the roofs in Solstice Heights. A 1987 state designation marking Solstice Valley a historic agricultural district. Not a feel-good plaque. Real teeth. Any new development within 2 miles of designated heritage vineyards requires environmental impact studies. Required. Not suggested. I cross-checked Preston's permits, and my stomach did a slow, satisfied flip. 0 impact studies. 0 compliance. Dozens of homes built on shortcuts and prayer. Buyers thought they were purchasing dreams. On paper, a lot of those dreams looked flimsy. Meanwhile, the harassment went from petty to criminal. My best Pinot block woke up to a sliced irrigation line, clean cuts, maximum damage. Wedding clients started getting anonymous calls about chemical contamination. 3 couples canceled. Fake reviews bloomed online like mold. Wine tastes like vinegar. Family got sick. Bride swed. Creative fiction mean. Specific. And absolutely intentional. Jake filed for a temporary restraining order against HOA-linked harassment. 18 pages of legal do not dare. Dr. Sarah Bennett, a soil scientist Jake trusted, stepped in to document environmental harms from Preston subdivision's groundwater stress. Erosion. Broken wildlife corridors. The report read like a crime scene. Then, 3 board members quietly resigned, citing ethical concerns. Translated, Karen's train was headed for a cliff. And they did not want seats. Publicly, Karen doubled down. Privately, Preston's finances looked wobbly. Records showed construction loans stacked high. With a bank clock ticking. No wonder they were frantic. Desperate people do dumb things. When a dead fish showed up at my gate with a note real subtle, I installed more cameras and started forwarding everything to a federal contact. Jake knew. Barrel didn't like the smell of it either. He prowled the fence line at dusk with his tail up, like a furry deputy. Then Preston himself arrived one foggy morning. Briefcase in hand. Smile pasted on like a label. "Marcus," he said. Voice pitched friendly. "Let's be reasonable." He offered me a buyout first. A few million. Then more cash. Fast. And with a smile about how this could all go away. He also let slip the kind of quiet threats folks make when they think the room isn't recording. It was. The agent who'd once inspected my place had a second badge in his wallet. And he'd wired me up weeks ago. All of that is how we walked toward the day Karen thought would be my public scolding, and it turned into her public unmasking. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you've ever had an HOA, try to micromanage your mailbox color. Imagine how they act when there's land money at stake. It ain't pretty. And it ain't legal. The town posted a notice for community mediation at the hall neutral ground. Neutral tone. Neutral cookies from the grocery store bakery. Karen sent emails with words like civility and cooperation. My phone lit up with neighbors whispering, "Are you going?" I was going. Jake prepped binders. Dr. Bennett printed maps with colored overlays that made the environmental damage look like bruises on the hills. Father Miguel, yeah. A priest and a community organizer gathered stories from farm crews displaced by subdivisions. And Ethel. God bless that woman. Flagged permit gaps. Only someone who's read filing cabinets, like novels, would catch. Night before the meeting. The valley went violet and gold. I walked the rows with Barrel, who kept stopping to sniff the air like he heard trouble trying to find us. "We're ready," I told him. "I mean, we're as ready as we get." He wagged once and sat like a soldier. The hall filled fast. Standing room only. The buzz was, how do I put it, electric and sour at once. Local news set up in the back. Karen took the front row in a power suit that could cut glass. Her binder stacked high. Preston came with 2 attorneys, whose watches probably cost a semester of college. The mediator, Judge Wells. Retired, tapped the mic and asked for order. Karen went first. She performed indignation like she practiced in the mirror. "We care about safety," she said. About harmony. About standards. She held up her petition. "There's people afraid of trucks. Of noise. Of chemicals." She said commercial agricultural operation like a curse. Preston followed with the Benevolent Developer Act. "I came here to build community," he said. Voice warm as a realtor's brochure. If purchasing Mr. Thornfield's land helps everyone, I'm willing to explore that. Fair market value. Of course. My turn. I stood, spine straight as a trellis, and thanked the room for showing up. I laid the deed on the table. Perpetual farming rights. I laid the heritage designation. I laid the survey, showing my property extending under 3 immaculate lawns. I laid Dr. 8. Bennett's overlays groundwater drawdown. Eroded slopes. Wildlife paths choked by fences. I laid Ethel's notes, permits missing where the law requires them. Environmental studies absent, where the statute says must. The hum in the room changed. A low murmur. Like bees waking. And here, I said, is a timeline of harassment. I walked through the anonymous complaints. The sliced lines. The fake reviews. The letters timed to weddings and harvest. This isn't about offense. It's leverage. It's pressure to sell. Then I glanced to the back, where 2 familiar faces stood by the door. And because wire and mail traveled across state lines during these transactions, I believe some other folks wanted a word. Agent Rodriguez and 2 federal marshals stepped forward. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Preston went a color that matched the cheap ceiling paint. Cameras clicked like a hailstorm. We didn't leave in handcuffs, not that night. Investigations take their time. But the air had shifted. Karen's certainty curdled into something sour. Her smile, once lacquered, now looked like paint on a damp wall. The weeks after felt like a slow dawn cold at first, then warmer by degrees. Farmers who'd stayed quiet showed up at my barn with thermoses and stories. They tried it on us. One said, "Eyes hard." We didn't know the words to fight back. We built a little alliance. Shared counsel. Shared maps. Shared courage. Father Miguel brought tamales that could heal broken faith. Ethel brought photocopies and receipts. Jake brought a stubbornness that smelled like good coffee and late nights. Dr. Bennett brought data so clean even skeptics had to nod. Karen, meanwhile, bone out, screaming matches in the grocery store aisle. Late-night rants online about outside agitators. The HOA board fractured like old wood resignations. Recall chatter. Whispers. Preston tried one last time, a bigger number. A tighter timeline. A nicer smile. "It's the adult thing to do," he said. Palms out. As if we were 2 dads negotiating over a soccer schedule. I told him no. He said, "You don't know who you're dealing with." And that, right there, was the truest sentence he ever spoke, just not the way he meant it. When the state attorney general's office called, I set my coffee down and said, "Tell me where to send the files." When the reporter from Channel 7 asked for an on-camera tour, I said yes, with one condition. She had to drink my wine and say on record whether it tasted like vinegar. She laughed and said, "Deal." By harvest, the valley smelled like crushed fruit and change. Lawsuits landed. Injunctions stuck. A judge used the word egregious about permit shortcuts. Banks got real interested in where their money slept. Buyers asked hard questions. Builders started seeing fences where they once saw only profits. And Karen, well, the mask had slipped. And behind it was just a person who loved control more than community. I almost felt sorry. Almost. 6 months later, the courtroom was cool as a cellar. Preston faced the judge. The charges had braided together wire fraud, mail fraud, environmental violations. The judge spoke calmly, as if reading a weather report about a storm that already passed. Sentences were measured in years, not months. Fines tallied with commas. Restitution pointed back toward the valley. Karen took her turn in a smaller room, for a shorter list. But the gavel still sounded like a door closing. She lost the thing she prized most, her title, and the trappings that came with it. Consequences don't taste sweet, but they do taste honest. But the better story was outside. The state-certified Solstice Valley as a protected agricultural heritage district with teeth strong as an oak's roots. The worst of the illegal builds came down, and what rose in their place was not more asphalt, but open land wildlife corridors stitched back together. A park where kids can run and learn what a vine looks like before it becomes a bottle. Business picked up. Yeah. But that ain't the headline. The headline is, neighbors learning how to be neighbors again. Weddings returned to the barn with laughter that rang against rafters. Granddad hammered. Tourists came to taste what the valley actually is. Our label Justice Valley found shelves we never dreamed about. Beryl got a partner. A rescue named Justice who thinks gophers are a moral failing and naps are a civil right. Dr. Bennett stayed longer and longer after meetings, until one night staying just turned into being here. She keeps a microscope on the kitchen counter and mud on her boots by the door. We plant cover crops and talk about microbes like they pay rent. Healing is a slow thing. It came anyway. On Sundays, Father Miguel preaches about stewardship and the sin of pretending land is only numbers. Ethel is writing a book, Filing Cabinets and Felons, she calls it. And I swear I would buy 10 copies. Farmers from other states began calling. Oregon, Texas, Vermont. They're running the same play. One said. So we share our playbook, back deeds, easements, designations. The power of showing up 3 times in a row with coffee and a calm voice. Truth is, there's a whole network out there, developers who use shell companies and HOAs like battering rams. Prosecutors are paying attention now. So are lawmakers. Change crawls. But once it gets traction, it moves. Sometimes at dusk, I stand at the top of the hill and look down at rows that hold 3 generations of sweat and hope. The wind carries the sound of dogs and laughter. Every now and then, a tanker truck groaning its way to someone else's harvest. The light gets honey thick, and for a second I can almost see Granddad's shadow, straight-backed, nodding once, like, yeah, kid, you did right. If you've ever been bullied by a rulebook, hear this: you're allowed to learn the rules better than the bully. You're allowed to fight back with facts. And you don't have to do it alone, even when it feels like you are. Anyone else had an HOA try this on you? What would you have done here? Drop your story. Somebody out there needs the words you've got.